Calculations suggest that the radiation dose was. Moreover, the spacecrafts were carefully shielded to protect against the worst of the radiation. The lack of a blast crater beneath the lunar module has been similarly addressed. Scientists explain that the moon's surface is composed of compacted regolith, a type of soil that doesn't behave like Earth's sand or dirt. The lander's engine was throttled down during the final descent, producing far less force than would be necessary to create a large, dramatic crater. As for dust disturbance, high-speed footage shows fine particles being blown away radially, consistent with what would be expected in a low-gravity, airless environment. As for the missing telemetry data, NASA has stated that the original tapes were likely erased and reused during a period when magnetic tape was expensive and in short supply. While this explanation has done little to quiet conspiracy theorists, skeptics argue that multiple copies of the data still exist through other sources, and that losing original tapes does not inherently imply fraud. The subdued demeanor of the astronauts during the post-mission press conference has been explained in more human terms. They had just returned from an intense, physically grueling, and mentally exhausting experience. The stress of the mission, the media frenzy, and the responsibility of representing one of humanity's greatest achievements could explain their reserved behavior without assuming guilt. Ultimately, those who dispute the moon landing hoax theory argue that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. They point out that no insider whistleblower has ever come forward, that thousands of engineers, scientists, and contractors would have had to maintain perfect silence for over half a century. They assert that while it's easy to find seeming anomalies in complex events, misunderstanding and misinterpretation are far more likely than an elaborate government deception. Beyond the arguments for or against the moon landing hoax, the theory itself reveals something deeper about society, a profound skepticism toward authority, and a growing sense of disillusionment with the official narratives presented by governments and media. Whether true or false, the theory has left a lasting mark, shaping how people engage with history, science, and even each other. The broader cultural implications are impossible to ignore. In the decades following the Apollo missions, Americans witnessed a series of scandals that eroded public trust: Watergate, Vietnam, Iran-Contra, and more. Against this backdrop, questioning the moon landing didn't seem so radical. It became part of a larger, slow-building realization that those in power are not always transparent, and that sometimes public narratives are constructed for political ends. The moon landing hoax theory also taps into a deeper psychological phenomenon: the human need to question monumental events that seem almost too perfect or too heroic. Achievements that push the boundaries of possibility naturally invite doubt. For many, it's easier to believe in a grand deception than to accept that fallible humans, using 1960s technology, could successfully land on an alien world and return. On a political level, the theory reflects Cold War anxieties. At a time when propaganda was a weapon wielded by both East and West, it became increasingly difficult for ordinary citizens to separate fact from fiction. In such an environment, questioning the moon landing was less about the specifics of space travel and more about a general skepticism toward the machinery of state power. Psychologically, conspiracy theories like the moon hoax offer a sense of control. In a chaotic world filled with uncertainties, believing that events are manipulated, even maliciously, can be more comforting than accepting randomness and human error. It provides a narrative structure, a cause and effect relationship that restores a sense of predictability to an otherwise unpredictable world. Socially, the theory has influenced how people consume information. It fostered a spirit of critical inquiry, or depending on perspective, relentless cynicism. Those who believe the moon landing was faked often pride themselves on being independent thinkers, unwilling to accept official explanations at face value. This attitude has trickled into broader discourse, influencing how people approach other historical events, scientific claims, and governmental announcements. The moon hoax theory also highlights the power of visual media. The iconic footage of Armstrong's descent, the planting of the flag, theory has become a reference point for skepticism in the modern era. In media, the moon hoax has been explored, debated, and reimagined countless times. Documentaries, television specials, books, and podcasts have dissected every aspect of the Apollo missions. Some present evidence to reaffirm the authenticity of the landing. Others lean into the mystery, offering open-ended explorations that feed the public's appetite for conspiracy. This proliferation of content has blurred the line between journalism and entertainment, fact and speculation. Popular culture embraced the hoax narrative almost as soon as it emerged. Movies like Capricorn One imagined a Mars landing hoax eerily similar to the moon landing theory. Shows like The X-Files wove themes of government deception and hidden truths into their storylines, drawing inspiration from real-world doubts seeded by theories like the Apollo hoax. Even comedies like The Simpsons and Family Guy have lampooned the idea, embedding it further into public consciousness. Social media has amplified the theory in ways unimaginable during the Apollo era. Platforms like YouTube, Reddit, and Twitter have provided spaces for amateur sleuths, amatrists, independent researchers, and content creators to share their analyses, reenactments, and speculations. Viral videos questioning the moon landing's authenticity garner millions of views, keeping the debate alive among younger generations who were not alive when Apollo 11 touched down. The hoax theory has also influenced how people interpret official narratives more broadly. Whenever a major event occurs, whether it's political, scientific, or cultural, a segment of the population now instinctively asks, is this real? The moon landing theory paved the way for this automatic skepticism, encouraging a mindset where questioning becomes second nature. Educational institutions have grappled with how to address the theory. Some educators use it as a case study in critical thinking, showing how evidence can be manipulated or misunderstood. Others see it as a cautionary tale about the dangers of misinformation. Either way, the hoax theory has become a permanent part of the cultural conversation about how knowledge is created, challenged, and preserved. The theory's impact on scientific communication has been profound. Scientists and space agencies must now preemptively defend their achievements against a backdrop of skepticism. Whether announcing new space missions, releasing images of distant planets, or discussing extraterrestrial exploration, they are often met with public doubt seeded by decades-old conspiracy narratives. At its core, the moon landing hoax theory serves as a reminder of the fragility of trust in institutions. It reveals how easily public perception can be shaped, not just by facts, but by the stories people choose to believe. And it shows that once a seed of doubt is planted, no amount of evidence may ever fully erase it. In this way, the moon hoax theory isn't just a question about the past. It's a lens through which the present and future are constantly viewed, questioned, and reinterpreted. Among the many threads woven into the moon landing conspiracy, there exists an even deeper layer of speculative fringe theories, ideas that push the narrative beyond simple deception and into realms of science fiction, hidden agendas, and cosmic secrets. These outlier theories have found devoted followings, offering ever more elaborate explanations for what some believe was covered up in 1969. One of the most prominent fringe ideas suggests that the moon landing footage wasn't faked merely to cover a failed mission. It was staged because the real Apollo missions discovered something humanity wasn't ready to see. According to this version, astronauts encountered extraterrestrial life on the moon, structures, artifacts, or even beings that made it impossible to reveal the truth to the public. Rather than admit to a contact event that would shatter worldviews and destabilize global power structures, NASA allegedly chose to produce sanitized footage, keeping the true discoveries classified. This theory often draws on the supposed radio silence and the missing minutes of Apollo 11's broadcast. Believers claim that during a gap in communications, Armstrong and Aldrin witnessed unknown structures on the moon's surface, massive, geometric shapes not formed by nature. Some versions go further, asserting that the astronauts were warned away from the moon by a superior intelligence, explaining why, after the early 1970s, lunar exploration abruptly ceased. Another fringe narrative ties the moon landing hoax to secret space programs. This idea posits that while the Apollo footage was staged for public consumption, in reality, the United States, and possibly other nations, had already developed advanced spacefaring capabilities far beyond the Saturn V rocket. Hidden from the public, secret missions allegedly colonized parts of the moon or established military installations in deep space, keeping the real scope of space travel tightly under wraps. An even more esoteric theory suggests that the moon itself is not a natural celestial body, but an artificial structure, an ancient satellite placed in Earth's orbit by unknown entities. Proponents argue that certain lunar anomalies, such as the hollow-sounding ring detected during seismic tests, point to this possibility. In this context, the moon landing would have posed existential questions that humanity wasn't prepared to answer, necessitating a cover-up at all costs. Some theorists also draw connections to occult symbolism. They argue that the timing of the moon landing, its phrasing, and the rituals surrounding it, planting the flag, the chosen words of Armstrong were steeped in hidden esoteric meaning. In this reading, the event was not just a technological achievement, but a ritualistic act designed to initiate humanity into a new age of cosmic consciousness or global control. These speculative layers, while often dismissed by mainstream voices, persist because they satisfy a deeper hunger for hidden knowledge. They suggest that behind every official story lies a web of secrets more profound than most dare to imagine. And they amplify the sense that the moon landing hoax, if it did occur, was not merely about winning a geopolitical contest, but about managing truths far stranger and perhaps far more unsettling than simple national pride could explain. More than 5 decades after that grainy black and white footage first captured the imagination of millions, the moon landing hoax theory remains one of the most persistent and provocative conspiracy narratives in modern history. It began with questions, some reasonable, some speculative, and grew into a sprawling tapestry of suspicion, symbolism, and science reimagined. Whether you believe the Apollo 11 mission was mankind's greatest achievement or its greatest deception, the legacy of that night in July 1969 is undeniable. We've explored the political context of the Cold War, where winning the space race meant far more than scientific discovery. We've looked at the key figures, NASA officials, astronauts, filmmakers, whose real or alleged roles helped shape the theory. We've examined the evidence, the waving flag, the missing stars, the photographs, the shadows, the radiation belts. We've analyzed how that evidence has been interpreted, challenged, and defended. And we've seen how skepticism itself has become a cultural force, as much a reaction to past betrayals as to the facts themselves. We've looked at how the theory has evolved through the decades, moving from books and whispers to documentaries, internet forums, viral videos, and mainstream discourse. We've seen how it has inspired Hollywood, sparked academic debate, and found new life in the age of algorithm-driven information. We've also explored how it mirrors something deeper, the psychological need for alternative explanations in an age where trust in institutions is fractured and reality feels increasingly curated. And then there are the fringe theories, the ones that go beyond faked footage, suggesting contact with alien civilizations, hidden military operations, or esoteric rituals hidden in plain sight. The further one dives into the theory, the clearer it becomes that the moon landing hoax has never just been about whether men walked on the moon. It's about whether the truth we're told is ever the full story. It's about what people are willing to believe when institutions fail them, or when they succeed too perfectly. In a way, the theory endures because it offers something seductive. The idea that those who see through the veil are somehow closer to the truth than the rest of us. That they've uncovered the lie, connected the dots, and awakened to a hidden world just beneath the surface of history. And even if it isn't true, even if the Apollo 11 mission was exactly what it claimed to be, the fact that so many still ask the question is revealing in itself. Because in the end, the moon landing hoax isn't just about space. It's about trust, about belief, about the fine line between truth and theater in a world where the two often blur. It's about what we choose to accept, what we demand to question, and what we're willing to imagine when the cameras start rolling and the world looks up. Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Noah Smith, and this has been another episode of Conspiracy Theories Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you would like to support the show, subscribe to Conspiracy Theories Podcast on Spotify. The link is in the description. Subscribe now. Welcome to Conspiracy Theories Podcast. I'm your host, Noah Smith, and in today's episode, we're diving into a theory so bold, so far-reaching, that it challenges the very nature of reality itself. Known as Project Blue Beam, this alleged covert operation claims governments and global institutions are planning the ultimate deception, an elaborate high-tech hoax designed to unite the world under one false flag. Could it be the final step toward global control, disguised as a revelation from the skies? The 1990s were a fertile ground for conspiracy theories, an era marked by deepening distrust in government institutions, growing skepticism of global organizations, and the rise of the digital age, which offered fringe ideas a new platform to spread. Against this backdrop, Project Blue Beam emerged not as a single event, but as a whispered threat of things to come. A final act in a decade to reshape global belief systems and consolidate control through fear and illusion. The theory's foundation is rooted in the work of Serge Monast, a Canadian investigative journalist who first presented the idea to the public in 1994. Monast claimed that NASA, in coordination with the United Nations, was developing an advanced psychological operation, a technological simulation so powerful it could imitate religious miracles on a worldwide scale. The purpose? To dismantle traditional beliefs, usher in a new one-world religion, and centralize global power under a single totalitarian government. To fully understand why such a theory found traction, we need to consider the cultural landscape of the late 20th century. The Cold War had only recently ended, and the collapse of the Soviet Union left a vacuum in the global order. Meanwhile, advances in satellite technology, space exploration, and telecommunications were transforming how people view the planet and each other. The increasing visibility of organizations like the UN, NATO, and the International Monetary Fund led some to suspect that sovereign nations were quietly ceding power to unelected international authorities. Religiously, the world was becoming more fractured and more connected at the same time. Evangelical movements were booming in the West, while Eastern spiritual philosophies gained popularity. The idea that religion could be weaponized or supplanted by something artificial was both terrifying and compelling to believers across the spectrum. Technological breakthroughs added fuel to the fire. Holographic projections, voice-to-skull communication patents, and HAARP, High-Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, were beginning to surface in public consciousness. To some, these weren't simply scientific curiosities. They were pieces of a larger puzzle, revealing capabilities far beyond what most people imagined possible. This atmosphere, simmering with suspicion, disillusionment, and rapid change, provided the perfect conditions for a theory like Project Blue Beam to take hold. The idea that unseen forces were planning a global psychological manipulation wasn't just frightening. It felt plausible to a population increasingly wary of media, government, and global institutions. It's important to note that Project Blue Beam didn't spring from one singular source. It grew through underground newsletters, radio broadcasts, early internet forums, and word of mouth. It evolved, adapted, and absorbed elements from UFO lore, biblical prophecy, and cutting-edge science fiction. What began as a little-known warning became, for some, the blueprint for a coming apocalypse, not one of fire and brimstone, but of screens, signals, and simulated saviors. And so, beneath the surface of ordinary life, a question began to fester in the minds of those paying close attention. What if the next world-changing event wasn't divine, alien, or natural, but scripted? A production so vast and so detailed that when it unfolded, humanity wouldn't question its reality. They'd accept it willingly. The name most closely associated with Project Blue Beam is Serge Monast, a journalist with a background in poetry and political commentary. Monast was not a scientist or intelligence insider. Yet in 1994, he released a document that would ripple through underground conspiracy networks for decades to come. Titled simply Project Blue Beam, NASA, the paper outlined what he claimed was a multi-phase plan orchestrated by the United Nations and NASA to usher in a new global religion and dictatorship. According to Monast, the project would unfold in 4 distinct phases. The first would involve the breakdown of all archaeological knowledge, a rewriting of history achieved through artificially induced earthquakes that would unearth discoveries contradicting established religious doctrines. The idea was to destabilize spiritual belief systems by revealing evidence that cast doubt on their foundational myths. The second phase, Monast claimed, would involve a massive space show. Using advanced holographic technology and satellite projection systems, global powers would simulate an apocalyptic event in the skies, complete with artificial deities specific to each culture. These entities would merge into one new god figure, urging humanity to unify under a single belief system. Monast was specific. The projection would be visible from all corners of the Earth, tailored linguistically and visually to each region to maximize psychological impact. Phase 3 would take the deception deeper by simulating telepathic communication using extremely low-frequency very low-frequency VLF, and low-frequency LF signals. These transmissions, Monast believed, would be beamed directly into people's brains, making them think their new god was speaking to them personally. This auditory illusion would cement belief, bypassing logical resistance by mimicking divine revelation. The fourth and final phase would be the manifestation of supernatural phenomena through sophisticated technology. This would include staged miracle events, the materialization of alien ships, and even a mock rapture, designed to plunge the world into chaos, prompting global cries for order and leadership. This, Monast warned, would be the tipping point at which the New World Government would rise and declare martial law. It's important to note that Monast died in 1996 under circumstances that some have deemed suspicious. Officially, he suffered a heart attack. But among Blue Beam believers, his death was anything but natural. They point to his repeated warnings that he was being monitored, harassed, and threatened by authorities. Some claim his arrest just prior to his death was a scare tactic, or a final attempt to silence him. Beyond Monast, other names have been linked to the theory in more recent years. Whistleblowers, UFO researchers, and fringe theorists have cited DARPA, HAARP, and even SpaceX as possible players in the development of Blue Beam-related technology. Though concrete evidence is scarce, believers argue that these organizations possess the technical capacity to pull off such illusions, and more importantly, the motive. Whether Monast was a prophet, a paranoiac, or something in between, His warnings about a technological second coming have endured. And as the world moves deeper into an era of AI-generated media, deepfakes, and real-time global broadcasting, his decades-old predictions have taken on a chilling relevance. According to those who believe in the reality of Project Bluebeam, there are key pieces of evidence, clues scattered across government programs, technological patents, and real-world events that point to its existence. These claims form the backbone of the theory, painting a picture of a long-running operation already well underway, hidden in plain sight. One of the most commonly cited elements is NASA's connection to advanced holographic projection. Conspiracy researchers have point patents filed by the U.S. military and private contractors related to 3D holography, volumetric imaging, and voice-to-skull V2K technology. These patents describe systems that could project sound directly into a person's head without the use of external speakers, using microwave auditory effects. The existence of such patents lends weight, at least superficially, to the claim that mind-to-mind communication could be simulated or even controlled. Another piece often referenced is the HAARP facility in Gakona, Alaska. Officially designed to study the ionosphere for research on radio communication and surveillance, HAARP has become infamous in conspiracy circles as a potential weather manipulation and electromagnetic warfare tool. Bluebeam theorists suggest HAARP's capabilities could allow it to trigger artificial earthquakes, tying directly into MONUS's claim that seismic activity would be used to reveal new archaeological discoveries. Others speculate HAARP could alter human thought patterns through L frequencies, creating sensations of fear, awe, or submission. Perhaps most eerie are the documented incidents of unexplained sky phenomena. In 2009, residents in Norway witnessed a massive, swirling light spiral that expanded across the night sky. Official sources attributed it to a failed Russian missile test. But Bluebeam proponents saw something different, a prototype test of large-scale sky projection. Similar events, spirals, luminous crosses, and strange cities in the sky, have been reported in China, South America, and the Middle East, often recorded by multiple witnesses and video footage. Supporters of the theory also reference mass simulations and psychological operations carried out in real life. The 1938 War of the Worlds radio broadcast by Orson Welles, which caused widespread panic, is cited as a prototype for mass media manipulation. More recent examples include military exercises such as Urban Shield and Jade Helm 15, massive training operations that, according to some, were dry runs for martial law implementation under the guise of disaster preparedness. Other evidence points to global religious symbols being subtly merged or redefined in media and pop culture. The portrayal of extraterrestrials as godlike beings, frequent narratives of one-world peace emerging from global catastrophe, and the introduction of synthetic spirituality in popular content are interpreted as soft conditioning, preparing the masses for the emergence of a unified global religion under Bluebeam's fourth phase. Satellite deployment is another concern. As Elon's program launches thousands of satellites into low Earth orbit, some theorists suggest this forms the physical infrastructure needed for real-time global projection. Could these satellites be the new tools of illusion? For believers, these scattered data points form a mosaic, a picture that can't be explained away by coincidence. They argue that when taken collectively, the patents, the strange lights, the military exercises, and the shifting cultural narratives all support the claim that something is being orchestrated on a planetary scale, something no longer just theoretical, but quietly unfolding before our eyes. Digging deeper into the evidence presented by Project Bluebeam theorists, we arrive at the question, how much of it stands up under scrutiny? Supporters often point to a network of facts and visual phenomena, but separating verifiable detail from speculative connection reveals a complex web of interpretation. Take, for instance, the patents on holographic technology and V2K systems. These documents do exist, filed by defense contractors and researchers dating back to the late 20th century. Some describe methods for projecting three-dimensional images into the air using plasma or lasers. Others detail the ability to send audio signals directly into the human skull via microwave pulses. But while the patents are real, their actual deployment at scale, especially in a global synchronized space show, remains unproven. Critics argue that patenting a technology does not guarantee its operational success or use. Still, Bluebeam adherents counter that military secrecy often prevents acknowledgement of such tech. They claim that black budget projects and classified defense initiatives have likely moved beyond what's publicly disclosed. After all, they argue it wasn't until decades after its use that the world learned of MKUltra, a real CIA mind control experiment. If covert programs like that were once hidden, why not this? The same ambiguity clouds HAARP. Scientific explanations for HAARP's capabilities focus on atmospheric research and communication. Yet the facility's remote location, high-frequency emissions, and military funding have led many to speculate it's being used for more sinister purposes, perhaps including atmospheric manipulation or psychological influence. Satellite imagery of HAARP shows massive antenna arrays capable of directing enormous bursts of energy upward. Whether or not that energy could create illusions in the sky or simulate spirals over Norway, glowing city-like shapes over China, and mysterious silent aerial lights witnessed by thousands, while official explanations, missile tests, refraction, or atmospheric anomalies have been offered in each case, believers argue that such events are too rare, too precise, and too eerily reminiscent of Monast's predicted space show to dismiss outright. Still, skeptics raise a key question. Why would a global simulation of divine events be necessary in an age when religious influence is already declining in many parts of the world? Believers respond with a counterpoint. Because belief is fracturing and people are desperate for meaning, a convincing supernatural event could unite them more powerfully than any ideology or flag. If control is the goal, then spiritual awe, especially on a global scale, is a lever. At the heart of the theory is an unsettling suggestion that technology has the average person's ability to differentiate real from CGI and holograms, all advancing rapidly. The question Project Blue asks isn't just, can they do it? But would we even know if they did? And that's what makes this theory so potent, not its evidence alone, but its chilling plausibility in a world already struggling to define what's real. As Project Bluebeam continues to gain attention in fringe communities and alternative media, a range of counter-arguments and skeptical perspectives have also taken shape. While many conspiracy theories are met with straightforward dismissal, this one draws more complex reactions, partly because it straddles a blurry line between theoretical possibility and unverifiable claim. And although we won't tell you what to believe, it's worth examining the perspectives of those who question the theory's structure and logic. One of the most cited criticisms is the sheer scale of coordination required to pull off such an operation. For Project Bluebeam to function as described, it would require a flawless alliance between NASA, the United Nations, various governments, military contractors, religious institutions, the media, and countless scientists and engineers. Critics argue that in a world where leaks are frequent and institutional trust is already crumbling, such a massive secret would be nearly impossible to maintain. There's also the issue of technical feasibility. While patents for holographic and directed audio technologies exist, the ability to project massive, region-specific three-dimensional images across the entire sky, visible to billions of people simultaneously, still surpasses the known limitations of current projection methods. Atmospheric distortion, variable weather conditions, and differences in geographic positioning present significant challenges to the level of visual control required for the space show Monast described. Skeptics also question the theory's reliance on unverified sources. Much of what supports Project Bluebeam stems from Monast's own writings, which were never supported by leaked documents, whistleblower testimony, or credible internal evidence. His sudden death, while tragic and suspicious to some, was not investigated further and remains officially attributed to a heart attack. Without clear insiders, critics argue the theory remains speculative. Religious scholars, too, have voiced doubt. The idea that a new world religion could be manufactured and accepted globally under a technologically simulated messiah presumes a level of religious uniformity that may not exist. Even under the threat of fear or awe, many communities maintain deeply rooted traditions and would likely view such events with suspicion or as demonic deception rather than divine truth. Still, others acknowledge that while the full theory may seem implausible, elements of it raise valid concerns. For instance, the increasing convergence of media, technology, and psychological manipulation is very real. Governments have historically used fear to steer public behavior, and the power of spectacle, especially one driven by emotion, confusion, and overwhelming visuals, can override reason in powerful ways. In that sense, Project Bluebeam isn't just a theory. It's a lens through which people examine the potential misuse of emerging technologies. Ultimately, for skeptics, the question isn't whether it could happen in theory, but whether any evidence shows it already is. Yet for believers, absence of proof is not proof of absence. It's further evidence of the plan's sophistication. And so, in the fog of half-truths and speculation, Project Bluebeam remains suspended in the collective imagination, neither entirely dismissed nor definitively proven. The result is a haunting space where doubt, fear, and fascination coexist, and where the line between science fiction and covert strategy grows ever thinner. Whether one views Project Bluebeam as a credible warning or an elaborate myth, there's no denying its cultural resonance. The theory taps into something far deeper than the mechanics of projection systems or electromagnetic frequencies. It speaks to a profound anxiety about perception, belief, and control. It questions the very foundations of how we understand the world and who gets to define what is real. In many ways, Bluebeam reflects a broader trend, the increasing weaponization of spectacle. From viral deepfakes to AI-generated news anchors, we are living in an era where the boundary between fabricated and authentic is rapidly dissolving. This is not a hypothetical concern. It's unfolding in real time. And this blurred line gives new life to Project Bluebeam, transforming it from a fringe curiosity into a metaphor for a deeper societal shift. Pop culture has embraced this blurring of reality. Films like The Matrix, Inception, and Don't Look Up echo the core anxieties of Bluebeam, asking whether the truths we cling to are real or carefully curated illusions. Music videos, video games, and immersive tech experiences often contain imagery that mirrors Monist's space show. Gods in the sky, sudden apocalypses, messages from the heavens. Whether intentional or not, these visuals feed a subconscious manipulation Bluebeam warns about. Politically, the theory's influence is more subtle but still noticeable. Movements rooted in skepticism
say goodbye. I'm listening to conspiracy theories. Anyways, I'm gonna go now. See you later. Bye.